Sunday morning hit me like a freight train carrying a load of regret. I was hunched over my Harley in our living room, oil-stained hands working on the carburetor, when I heard Danny's key scratching at the lock. 3 days of blessed silence were about to end. The door swung open, and there she stood. Daniella Reese, my girlfriend of 4 years, looking like she'd been dragged through a hedge backwards and then asked to explain quantum physics. Her usually perfect blonde hair hung limp, mascara smudged under her green eyes, and she was wearing the same clothes she'd left in Friday morning. But it wasn't her disheveled appearance that made me pause mid-wrench turn. It was the rock on her left hand that could have doubled as a paperweight. "Hey, babe," she said, dropping her designer weekend bag with a thud that echoed through our downtown loft. "We need to talk." I set down my tools and wiped my hands on an old rag, taking my sweet time. The engagement ring caught the morning light streaming through our floor-to-ceiling windows, throwing little rainbows across the exposed brick walls we'd spent 2 years painting together. "No need," I said, standing up and brushing off my jeans. Danny blinked, confusion replacing the rehearsed speech I could see forming behind her eyes. "What do you mean, no need?" I walked to the kitchen island where I'd left 3 cardboard boxes and a manila envelope. "Your stuff's packed. Figured you'd want a head start with your new fiancé." The color drained from her face faster than oil from a cracked pan. "Evan, how did I know?" I interrupted, leaning against the counter with my arms crossed. "Danny, sweetheart, you've been acting shadier than a used car salesman for months. The mysterious phone calls, the sudden interest in girls' weekends, the fact that you haven't touched me since July. I may work with my hands, but I'm not stupid." She opened her mouth, then closed it, looking like a fish gasping for water. The engagement ring seemed to weigh down her entire arm. "Besides," I continued, enjoying the moment more than I probably should have, "Mrs. Cray from 4B saw you getting out of a silver Porsche yesterday morning. Same car that's been picking you up for your yoga classes that apparently happen at the Four Seasons." Our elderly neighbor had been worth her weight in gold these past few weeks, though she didn't know it. The woman could spot a cheating spouse from 3 blocks away and had a memory like a steel trap. Danny's face cycled through several emotions: surprise, anger, guilt, then back to that calculating look I'd grown to hate. "Evan, listen, it's not what you think. Blake and I—" "Blake," I laughed, but there wasn't much humor in it. "So that's his name. Blake what? Blake something pretentious, I'm guessing?" "Blake Moreau," she said quietly, and I had to give her credit for not trying to lie anymore. "He owns Moreau Financial Solutions." "The fintech startup with the fancy offices downtown?" I knew the company. They'd been in the news lately, something about expanding into cryptocurrency. "Well, congratulations. You've traded up from a gym owner to a CEO. Your parents must be thrilled." Danny's chin lifted, and for a moment I saw a flash of the woman I'd fallen in love with. Defiant, passionate, unafraid to fight for what she wanted. Too bad what she wanted wasn't me anymore. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this," she said. "We met at the marketing conference in Boston, and we just connected. He understands my ambitions, Evan. He supports my career goals. And I don't?" The question came out sharper than I intended. "You own a gym," she said, as if that explained everything. "Blake owns a company worth millions. He travels. He has connections. He can give me the life I've always wanted." There it was. The truth, laid out like a blueprint for heartbreak. I'd known it was coming, had felt it building like pressure in a boiler, but hearing it still hit like a sucker punch. "The life you've always wanted," I repeated slowly. "Funny, I thought you wanted the life we were building together. Silly me." I picked up the manila envelope and held it out to her. "Give this to Blake. Consider it a wedding gift." Danny took the envelope with shaking hands. "What is it?" "My rent bill for the last 3 years," I said. "Turns out, when you're living with someone and they're paying all the utilities, groceries, and mortgage while you're saving for your dream wedding, it adds up." There's also a key in there. A key to what? I smiled, and this time it was genuine. Storage Unit 247 at Secure Space on Maple Street. That's where I put everything that didn't fit in these boxes. You've got until the end of the month before they auction it off. The silence stretched between us like a canyon. Outside, I could hear the Sunday morning sounds of our neighborhood. Kids playing in the courtyard, someone starting their car, the distant sound of church bells from St. Mary's down the street. I loved you, Danny said finally, her voice small. I know, I replied. That's what makes this so damn sad. She picked up the first box, struggling with its weight. I didn't offer to help. Evan, Save it, Danny. You made your choice. Now live with it. She loaded the boxes into her car, a Honda Civic I'd helped her buy 2 years ago, while I watched from the window. When she drove away, I noticed she took the turn toward her parents' house instead of toward downtown, where Blake presumably lived. Going to break the news to Mommy and Daddy, I thought. Wonder how she'll explain the timeline. Mrs. Cray appeared at my door 20 minutes later with a casserole and a hungry look in her eyes. That girl finally showed her true colors, did she? She asked, bustling into my kitchen like she owned the place. Something like that, I said, accepting the food gratefully. I hadn't eaten since Friday. I never liked her, Mrs. Cray announced, settling herself at my kitchen table. Too fancy for her own good, always putting on airs. And that car that's been picking her up? I got the license plate number if you want it. I paused in the act of opening the casserole dish. You got the license plate? Course I did. 40 years as a court stenographer teaches you to pay attention to details. Silver Porsche Cayenne, Massachusetts plates. Want me to write it down? Looking at Mrs. Cray's eager face, I realized I'd just been handed a gift. Information was power, and power was exactly what I was going to need for what came next. Yeah, I said, grabbing a pen and paper. Write it down. As she scribbled the plate number in her careful handwriting, I felt something shift inside me. The hurt was still there, sharp and hot, but underneath it was something else, something colder and more patient. Danny thought she'd played me for a fool. Blake thought he'd won some kind of prize. They had no idea what they'd just unleashed. I was going to enjoy teaching them. Monday morning found me at Iron Haven, the gym I'd built from nothing over the past 8 years. The familiar smell of sweat, rubber, and determination usually centered me. But today, I felt like a shark that had caught the scent of blood in the water. Tommy Brennan was waiting for me by the front desk, 2 cups of coffee in hand, and a grin on his weathered face. My best friend since high school, Tommy had done 20 years as a Boston cop before retiring to our little coastal city. He had the kind of connections that came in handy when you needed information fast. Heard you're a free man again, he said, handing me a coffee. Mrs. Cray called my wife at 6 this morning. Apparently there was quite the show yesterday. News travels fast in this town, I said, unlocking my office and waving him inside. Especially when it involves the Ice Queen finally getting her comeuppance. Tommy settled into the chair across from my desk. So, what's the plan? I raised an eyebrow. What makes you think there's a plan? Because I know you, Evan Marsden. You're not the type to just roll over and take it. Plus, you've got that look. What look? The same look you had in Afghanistan when you found out which Taliban cell had been targeting our supply convoys. Cold, calculating, and absolutely terrifying if you're on the wrong side of it. Tommy wasn't wrong. My 3 tours overseas had taught me patience, planning, and the value of good intelligence. They'd also taught me that sometimes the best defense was a devastating offense. I pulled out the license plate number Mrs. Cray had given me. Think you can run this for me? Tommy glanced at the paper and chuckled. Blake Moreau, 42, lives at the Pinnacle Towers downtown. Divorced, no kids, drives like he owns the road. Got pulled over for speeding twice last month but talked his way out of both tickets. You already know about him? Ran him when Mrs. Cray called. Old habits. Tommy leaned back in his chair. Want to know the interesting part? His company's been hemorrhaging money for 6 months. Word is, he's looking for investors to keep the lights on. This was getting better by the minute. What else? He's got a reputation around town, likes to flash his money, always has a different woman on his arm, tips big at the expensive restaurants. Classic nouveau riche behavior. And now he's got Danny. About that, Tommy's expression grew serious. You sure you want to go down this road? I mean, she's gone. You're free. Why not just move on? I stood up and walked to the window overlooking the gym floor. Early morning regulars were starting their routines. Sarah, the nurse, getting in her cardio before her shift. Old Pete working through his physical therapy exercises. Maria, the teacher, doing her strength training. These people trusted me, respected me, saw me as someone who had his life together. Danny had made me look like a fool in front of everyone who mattered to me. Because she didn't just leave Tommy, she humiliated me. She's been lying to my face for months while I paid her bills and planned our future. She made me the laughingstock of this entire town. So what do you want to do about it? I turned back to face him. I want to return the favor. Tommy was quiet for a long moment, studying my face. Finally, he nodded. What do you need? Everything you can find on Blake Moreau and his company. Financial records, personal history, business dealings. I want to know what skeletons he's got in his closet. That might take some time. I'm a patient man. After Tommy left, I spent the morning running the gym and thinking. Danny worked at Pinnacle Marketing, a mid-sized firm that handled social media and PR for local businesses. She was good at her job, manipulating public perception, spinning narratives, making people see what she wanted them to see. It's what had drawn me to her initially, that sharp intelligence and ambition. Now, I was going to use those same skills against her. Around noon, Melissa Chen walked into the gym. Danny's best friend since college, Melissa was everything Danny wasn't. Short, where Danny was tall, brunette where Danny was blonde, and blessed with the kind of loose tongue that made her a gossip's dream. Evan, she called out, approaching the front desk with obvious reluctance. I heard about… well, I'm so sorry. Are you? I asked, not looking up from the membership renewals I was processing. Of course I am. I had no idea Danny was… she never said anything to me about Blake. The lie came so easily, I almost believed her. Almost. Funny thing about that, Melissa. See, I've been going through Danny's phone records. We shared a plan, so I have access to all the account information. Turns out, she's been texting someone named M quite a bit over the past few months. Lots of messages about keeping secrets and covering for each other. Melissa's face went white. Evan, how long have you known? She looked around the gym like she was searching for an escape route. 2 months, she whispered. Maybe 3. She swore it wasn't serious, said she was just having fun. I told her she needed to break up with you first, but she said… She said what? She said you were convenient, that you took care of everything so she could save money for her real life. Melissa's voice got smaller with each word. I'm sorry, Evan. I should have told you. I felt that cold rage settle deeper into my chest. Convenient. 4 years of love, support, and partnership, and I was convenient. Thanks for the honesty, Melissa. Better late than never. She started to say something else, but I turned away and walked into my office, closing the door behind me. Through the window, I watched her hover by the front desk for a few minutes before finally leaving. My phone buzzed with a text message. Tommy. Got some interesting info on your boy Blake. Meet me at Murphy's at 6. Murphy's Pub was the kind of dive bar that served as the unofficial town hall for anyone who worked with their hands or had opinions they weren't supposed to share in polite company. The owner, Big Al Murphy, had been serving drinks and collecting secrets for 30 years. If you wanted to know something about someone in this town, Al was your man. I found Tommy in our usual booth, a pitcher of beer already on the table, and a manila folder next to his elbow. "This is better than I hoped," he said, sliding the folder across to me. "Blake Moreau is not the success story he pretends to be." I opened the folder and started reading. Financial statements, credit reports, business filings. It was all there, and it painted a picture of a man living far beyond his means. "His company's 3 months behind on rent," Tommy continued. "He's maxed out 4 credit cards, took a second mortgage on his condo, and borrowed against his car. The fancy lifestyle is all smoke and mirrors." "What about the engagement ring?" "Financed, 24-month payment plan at 18% interest." I had to laugh. "So he's broke." "Worse than broke. He's desperately broke and trying to maintain appearances. Word is, he's been courting a group of investors from New York, trying to get them to inject some capital into his company. And Danny doesn't know any of this. How could she? He's been very careful to keep up the facade. Expensive dinners, weekend trips, designer gifts, all on credit." I closed the folder and leaned back in the booth. "This is perfect." "What are you thinking?" Before I could answer, Big Al appeared at our table with a fresh pitcher and a knowing look. "Heard your girl traded you in for a newer model," he said, refilling our glasses. "That's a damn shame, Evan. You're one of the good ones." "Thanks, Al. Course, if it makes you feel any better, her new man's been in here bragging about his conquest. Real piece of work, that one. Loud, obnoxious, tips like a cheapskate despite all the talk about his money." My ears perked up. "Blake's been here?" "Few times over the past month, always with different women, always talking about his business deals and his expensive toys. Last week he was going on and on about some blonde he'd stolen from a local loser." Al's expression darkened. "Didn't realize he was talking about you until today." The cold rage was turning into something sharper, more focused. Blake hadn't just stolen my girlfriend, he'd been publicly humiliating me while he did it. "What else did he say?" "Plenty. Man loves the sound of his own voice. Talked about his yacht, his condo, his big business deals. Also mentioned something about a bachelor party next weekend. Apparently, he's getting married soon." Tommy and I exchanged glances. "Next weekend? That's pretty fast." "Rich folks don't waste time, I guess." Al shrugged. "Anyway, thought you should know. If you need anything, and I mean anything, you just let me know. Nobody disrespects one of my regulars like that." After Al left, Tommy leaned across the table. "So, what's the play?" I stared into my beer, thinking. Blake had money problems, a big ego, and a loose tongue. Danny had expensive tastes, a need for social approval, and a talent for manipulation. Both of them had made the mistake of underestimating me. "We're going to give them exactly what they deserve," I said finally. "But first, I need to have a conversation with Blake." "That sounds dangerous." I smiled, and this time it was all teeth. For him, maybe. Tuesday evening, I stood in the lobby of Pinnacle Towers, watching Blake Moreau's silver Porsche pull up to the valet stand. The building was all glass and steel, the kind of place that screamed, "I have money" to anyone within a 5-mile radius. The irony wasn't lost on me. Blake stepped out of his car like he was walking a red carpet. Tall, lean, with the kind of artificially perfect smile that came from expensive dental work, he handed his keys to the valet with the casual arrogance of someone who'd never had to park his own car. His suit probably cost more than most people made in a month, but thanks to Tommy's research, I knew it was all financed. I intercepted him at the elevator. "Blake Moreau?" I extended my hand with a friendly smile. "Evan Marsden. I believe you know my girlfriend, Danny." His face went through several interesting changes, confusion, recognition, then something that might have been guilt if he'd been capable of it. "Oh," he said, not taking my hand. "You." "Me," I agreed cheerfully. "Listen, I was hoping we could have a quick chat. Man to man, you know." Blake glanced around the lobby nervously. "I don't think that's a good idea." "Why not? We're both adults. Besides, I just want to thank you." That caught him off guard. Thank me? For taking Danny off my hands. Honestly, you did me a favor. I was starting to feel like an ATM with legs. The elevator arrived, and Blake stepped inside. After a moment's hesitation, he held the door for me. What floor? Wherever you're going is fine. We rode up in silence. Blake's condo was on the 20th floor with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a view of the harbor. It was the kind of place that looked expensive and soulless, all white furniture and abstract art that probably came from a catalog. Nice place, I said, walking to the windows. Must cost a fortune to maintain. It's manageable, Blake said stiffly. I bet. Danny's gonna love it here. She always said she wanted to live somewhere worthy of her ambitions. I turned to face him. Course, she said a lot of things. Blake poured himself a scotch from a crystal decanter on the bar. He didn't offer me one. Look, Evan. Actually, it's Mr. Marsden to you. His jaw tightened. Fine, Mr. Marsden. I'm sorry about how this happened, but Danny and we have something special. Something real. Oh, I'm sure you do. Tell me, how long have you two been together? Really together, I mean. 3 months. 3 months, I repeated. And you're already engaged. That's either true love or desperation. Which one is it, Blake? His face flushed red. I don't have to justify my relationship to you. No, you don't. But you might want to justify it to yourself. I walked over to his bookshelf, pretending to examine the titles. See, here's what I find interesting. Danny's been telling me she loves me and wants to build a future together right up until Sunday morning. So either she's the world's greatest actress, or she's the kind of woman who tells people what they want to hear until something better comes along. She chose me, Blake said, his voice tight with anger. She chose your money, I corrected. Big difference. Question is, what happens when she finds out you don't actually have any? Blake went very still. What are you talking about? I pulled out my phone and scrolled through the photos Tommy had sent me. Financial documents, credit reports, loan applications, all perfectly legal public records for someone who knew where to look. Moreau Financial Solutions, I read aloud. 3 months behind on rent, creditors circling, and a CEO who's leveraged everything he owns to maintain a lifestyle he can't afford. That's quite a house of cards you've built, Blake. His face had gone pale. How did you get this information? It's amazing what you can find out about someone when you know the right people to ask. I put my phone away. Don't worry, I'm not here to blackmail you or anything. Like I said, I'm grateful. Danny's expensive, and you're welcome to go broke trying to keep her happy. I headed for the door, then paused. Oh, one more thing. You might want to be more careful about where you brag about your conquests. Small town, big ears. Wouldn't want people to get the wrong impression about your character. I left Blake standing in his overpriced condo, looking like a man who'd just realized he was standing on quicksand. The next morning, I was at the gym early, working through my usual routine, when Danny walked in. She looked tired, stressed, and angrier than I'd seen her in years. What the hell did you say to Blake? She demanded, marching up to me as I finished a set of deadlifts. Good morning to you too, sweetheart. How are your parents taking the news? Don't change the subject. Blake said you came to his apartment and threatened him. I racked the weights and turned to face her. Threatened him? That's interesting. What exactly did he say I threatened him with? Danny's mouth opened, then closed. He said you were trying to intimidate him. By doing what? Shaking his hand? Complimenting his apartment? Having a civil conversation? I grabbed my towel and wiped the sweat from my face. Sounds like your fiancé has a guilty conscience. He's not guilty of anything. Isn't he? Then why is he so worried about what I might know? Danny stared at me for a long moment, and I could see the wheels turning in her head. She was smart enough to know I was playing some kind of game, but not smart enough to figure out what it was. Stay away from him, Evan. I'm serious. Or what? You'll call the police? And tell them what exactly? That your ex-boyfriend had a polite conversation with your new fiancé? She turned and stalked toward the door, then stopped. You're pathetic, you know that? Sitting here in your little gym, playing your little games, while Blake and I are building a real life together. A real life, I repeated. Is that what you call it? Tell me, Danny, when's the wedding? Next month. Next month? Wow, that is fast. Must be costing Blake a fortune. Good thing he's got all that money, right? Something flickered in her eyes, doubt maybe, or just the first whisper of suspicion. But she pushed it down and lifted her chin defiantly. He can afford it. I'm sure he can. Give him my best, will you? And tell him I said congratulations on the engagement ring. 24-month financing at 18%. That's quite a commitment. The color drained from Danny's face. How do you know about the ring? Lucky guess. I smiled. Have a great day, sweetheart. Try not to max out any more of Blake's credit cards. After she left, I pulled out my phone and called Tommy. Phase 1 complete, I said when he answered. They're rattled. What's Phase 2? I looked around my gym, my kingdom, built with sweat, determination, and honest work. Danny had called it pathetic, but it was mine. Every machine, every weight, every square foot of space represented something I'd earned. Phase 2 is where things get interesting. That afternoon, I drove to Secure Space Storage and opened Unit 247. Inside were 6 more boxes of Danny's belongings: designer clothes, expensive shoes, jewelry, photo albums, and keepsakes from our 4 years together. Everything that hadn't fit in the 3 boxes I'd packed for her. I loaded it all into my truck and drove to the women's shelter downtown. Sister Margaret, who ran the place, was delighted to accept the donation. These are beautiful clothes, she said, holding up a dress that had cost Danny $800. Our ladies will be so grateful. My pleasure, sister. Just doing my part. I kept one item, a framed photo of Danny and me from our vacation in Napa Valley 2 years ago. We looked happy, in love, like people who had a future together. I studied it for a moment, remembering the woman I'd fallen in love with, then tossed it in the dumpster behind the shelter. That evening, I met Tommy at Murphy's again. Big Al had saved us our usual booth and had a pitcher waiting. How'd she take the news about the ring? Tommy asked. About as well as you'd expect. But here's the interesting part. Blake told her I threatened him. Did you? Not directly, but I may have implied that I know more than I'm letting on. And do you? I smiled. Not yet, but I will. Al appeared at our table with a basket of wings and his usual gossip-hungry expression. Heard there was some excitement at your gym today. Danny looked madder than a wet cat when she left. News travels fast. Faster when the news involves someone getting their comeuppance. Speaking of which, your boy Blake was in here again last night. Seemed pretty rattled about something. My interest sharpened. Oh? Yeah, kept checking his phone, looking over his shoulder, ordered 3 drinks but barely touched them, finally left around midnight, muttering something about crazy ex-boyfriends. Tommy and I exchanged glances. Blake was cracking faster than I'd hoped. Al, I said carefully, hypothetically speaking, if someone wanted to make sure Blake felt unwelcome in certain establishments around town, how would they go about that? Al's grin was pure predator. Hypothetically, well, bar owners talk to each other. We share information about troublemakers, people who cause problems, customers who might not be as financially stable as they pretend to be. Word gets around. Hypothetically, of course. Of course. And hypothetically, if someone had documented proof of said financial instability, that information might find its way into the right hands. I pulled out a copy of Blake's credit report and slid it across the table. Hypothetically. Al glanced at the papers and whistled low. This is some serious debt. Hypothetically, this kind of information might make certain business owners nervous about extending credit or accepting checks. I would imagine so. Hypothetically. After Al left with the papers, Tommy shook his head. You're playing with fire, you know that? Maybe. But Blake started this game when he decided to publicly humiliate me. Now he gets to learn the rules. And Danny? I took a long drink of my beer, thinking about the woman I'd loved for 4 years, the woman who'd called me pathetic while standing in the gym I'd built with my own hands. Danny's about to get a very expensive education in the difference between love and convenience. My phone buzzed with a text message, unknown number. We need to talk. Meet me at Starbucks on Main Street tomorrow at 10 a.m. Come alone. B. I showed the message to Tommy, who laughed. Looks like Blake wants to negotiate. Looks like Blake's scared. I typed back a simple reply. See you there. Phase 2 was about to begin. Blake was already waiting when I arrived at Starbucks, hunched over a large coffee with the look of a man who hadn't slept much. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, and his expensive shirt was wrinkled. The cracks in his facade were starting to show. I ordered my coffee and sat across from him, saying nothing. Sometimes the best strategy is to let the other person fill the silence. Look, he said finally, his voice low and urgent. I don't know what game you're playing, but it needs to stop. Game? I sipped my coffee. I'm not playing any games, Blake. I'm just a simple gym owner, remember? Cut the crap. I know you've been digging into my finances. Have I? That's a serious accusation. Do you have any proof? His jaw tightened. I know it was you. The timing's too convenient to be coincidence. What timing would that be? Blake glanced around the coffee shop, then leaned forward. My credit cards were frozen yesterday. All of them. The bank said there were irregularities in my credit report that needed to be investigated. I raised an eyebrows. That's unfortunate. Identity theft is a real problem these days. This wasn't identity theft, and we both know it. Actually, I don't know anything about your financial problems, Blake, but I have to say, it explains a lot about your relationship with Danny. What's that supposed to mean? Well, she's always been attracted to successful men with money, security, prospects. If you're having financial difficulties, I shrugged. Let's just say Danny doesn't handle disappointment well. Blake's face went red. My relationship with Danny is solid. We love each other. I'm sure you do. Love's a beautiful thing. Of course, love doesn't pay for wedding venues or honeymoon suites. How much is this wedding costing you anyway? That's none of your business. You're right, it's not, but I bet it's more than you can afford. I stood up and tossed my empty cup in the trash. Good luck with everything, Blake. I hope it all works out for you. I was halfway to the door when he called after me. What do you want? I turned back. Excuse me? To make this stop, what do you want? The desperation in his voice was almost pitiful. Almost. I want you to tell me the truth about something. What? That night at Murphy's, when you were bragging about stealing Danny from some local loser. Did you know who I was? Blake's silence was answer enough. You did know. You knew exactly who I was, and you thought it would be funny to humiliate me in front of my friends and neighbors. I walked back to the table. That was your first mistake, Blake. Your second mistake was thinking I'd just roll over and take it. I was drunk. I didn't mean, yes, you did. You meant every word. You wanted everyone to know that you were better than me, richer than me, more successful than me. You wanted to rub my face in it. Blake looked around the coffee shop again, as if searching for an escape route. Okay, fine. Maybe I said some things I shouldn't have. I'm sorry. No, you're not. You're scared. There's a difference. I sat back down and leaned forward, lowering my voice. Here's what's going to happen, Blake. You're going to learn what it feels like to be humiliated. You're going to learn what it feels like to have people laugh at you behind your back. And you're going to learn what happens when you mess with someone who has nothing left to lose. Are you threatening me? I'm educating you. Consider it a public service. I left Blake sitting in the coffee shop and drove to Pinnacle Marketing. Danny's office was on the third floor of a converted warehouse downtown, all exposed brick and industrial lighting designed to look creative and cutting edge. The receptionist, a young woman named Ashley who'd always been friendly to me, looked surprised when I walked in. "Evan, I heard about… well, I'm sorry things didn't work out with Danny." "Thanks, Ashley. Actually, I'm here to see Ava Richardson. Is she available?" Ava was Danny's co-worker and, according to office gossip, her biggest rival for the next promotion. She was smart, ambitious, and had never particularly liked Danny's tendency to take credit for other people's ideas. "She's in conference room B," Ashley said. "I'll let her know you're here." Ava appeared a few minutes later, curiosity written all over her face. She was an attractive brunette in her early 30s, with the kind of sharp intelligence that reminded me why I'd always been drawn to ambitious women. "This is unexpected," she said, leading me to a small office overlooking the harbor. "What can I do for you?" "I wanted to thank you." "Thank me? For what?" "For being honest with me about Danny's affair." Ava's expression didn't change, but I caught a flicker of something in her eyes. "I'm not sure what you mean." "The anonymous email I received 2 weeks ago. Very detailed, very accurate. It gave me the heads up I needed to prepare for Sunday's conversation." I was fishing, but Ava's slight smile told me I'd caught something. "I don't know anything about an anonymous email," she said carefully. "Of course not. But hypothetically, if someone had sent such an email, I'd want them to know how much I appreciated it. And I'd want them to know that I believe in returning favors." Ava studied me for a long moment. "What kind of favors?" "The kind that help ambitious people get ahead in their careers, hypothetically speaking." "Hypothetically," she agreed. "What did you have in mind?" I pulled out my phone and showed her a photo I'd taken of Blake's credit report. "Pinnacle Marketing handles PR for several financial firms, doesn't it? Including some that might be interested in knowing about potential fraud in the fintech sector?" Ava's eyes widened as she scanned the information. "This is comprehensive." "I believe in being thorough. The question is, what should be done with this information?" "Well," Ava said slowly, "if a company was misrepresenting its financial position to potential investors, that would be securities fraud. The SEC would definitely want to know about it. And if someone were to report such fraud, they'd probably want to remain anonymous. Whistleblower protection only goes so far." I stood up and headed for the door. "It's been a pleasure talking with you, Ava. I hope we can do it again soon." "Evan," she called as I reached the door. "Hypothetically speaking, you might want to know that Danny's been telling everyone in the office that you're stalking her and Blake. She's been painting herself as the victim in all this." The cold rage flared again, but I kept my voice level. "Is that so?" "She's also been bragging about Blake's money and their expensive wedding plans. Very detailed descriptions of the venue, the dress, the honeymoon in Europe. It's all anyone's heard about for weeks." "Interesting. Thank you for letting me know." I left Pinnacle Marketing with a new understanding of just how deep Danny's betrayal went. She wasn't content to just leave me. She was actively destroying my reputation while building herself up as some kind of romantic heroine. That evening, I was closing up the gym when my phone rang. "Tommy." "You need to get down to Murphy's," he said without preamble. "Now." "What's wrong?" "Blake's here. He's drunk, he's loud, and he's telling anyone who'll listen that you're some kind of psychopath who's been stalking him and Danny." I was in my truck before he finished the sentence. Murphy's was packed for a Wednesday night, and I could hear Blake's voice from the parking lot. He was holding court at the bar, gesticulating wildly with a whiskey glass in his hand. "Completely unhinged," he was saying as I walked in. "The guy's been following us, threatening us, trying to destroy my business. It's like something out of a movie." The bar went quiet when they saw me. Blake turned around, and his face went white. "Speak of the devil," he said, but his voice shook. I walked up to the bar and ordered a beer from Al, who was watching the whole scene with obvious interest. "Blake," I said pleasantly. Fancy seeing you here. How are those credit cards working out for you? I don't know what you're talking about. Sure you don't. Al, has Blake been entertaining everyone with stories about me? Oh yeah, Al said, sliding my beer across the bar. Real interesting stories. Something about stalking and harassment. Course, that's funny, considering you've been in here every Wednesday for the past 5 years, and this is only the second time I've seen him. Blake's face got redder. I don't have to justify my presence here to anyone. No, you don't. But you might want to think twice about spreading lies about people in their own neighborhood. I took a sip of my beer, especially when those people have friends who know the truth. Tommy appeared at my elbow, along with Pete from the auto shop, Sarah from the hospital, and half a dozen other regulars I'd known for years. The message was clear. Blake was outnumbered and out of his element. Maybe you should head home, Blake, Tommy said quietly. Sleep off whatever's got you so worked up. Blake looked around the bar, realized he'd lost his audience, and slammed his glass down on the bar. This isn't over, he said, pointing at me. No, I agreed. It's not. After Blake stumbled out, Al refilled my beer and shook his head. That boy's got more problems than he knows what to do with. What do you mean? Got a call from Danny Kowalski over at the Harbor Club. Seems Blake's been running a tab there for months and his check bounced yesterday. Danny's not happy. Al's grin was the kind you only wore when you knew you'd just dropped a match into a dry field. We were parked in the back corner of O'Malley's, the kind of bar that still served beer in heavy glasses and didn't care who your father was. The Harbor Club crowd would have called it rustic with a sneer, which was exactly why I liked it. The Harbor Club was where the wealthy crowd went to see and be seen, Al said again, savoring it. If Blake's checks are bouncing there, word spreads before the ink dries. Tommy took a slow sip and stared down into his drink like he was weighing the situation in his head. That's not just embarrassing, he said. That's fatal. Those people live on perception. Perception, I repeated, and rolled the word around like a coin. That was what Blake had always traded in, looking successful, sounding confident, carrying himself like a man who couldn't fail. The kind of guy who wore expensive shoes and talked about investments at parties while quietly juggling overdue notices like they were playing cards. Al leaned closer, lowering his voice even though no one in the place cared what we were saying. My cousin Eddie works at the bank, he continued. Blake came in today trying to get a loan extension, but they turned him down. Something about irregular income reporting. Tommy's eyebrows lifted. Irregular income reporting? Al shrugged. That's what Eddie said. Could mean anything. Underreported, overreported, misclassified, doesn't matter. What matters is the bank heard it and didn't like it. I smiled into my beer, not because I was drunk on revenge, but because the shape of the truth was finally becoming visible. Banks didn't slam doors on men like Blake unless they smelled smoke. And where there was smoke, there was always paperwork. The walls are closing in, I said. They're closing, Al agreed. And Danny? She's walking around thinking she's marrying a man with a bright future. Tommy tapped the side of his glass thoughtfully. You sure she doesn't already know? I shook my head. She knows what he wants her to know. She knows the version of him he performs. The rest is hidden behind charm and excuses. Al snorted. Well, the Harbor Club doesn't care about charm when the check bounces. We sat there for a moment, letting the idea settle. Not just that Blake was failing, but that his failure was becoming public in the exact circles he'd been clawing into. Those people didn't do compassion. They did distance. They did whispers. They did quiet invitations that stopped arriving. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. You're going to pay for this. Both of you. I didn't flinch. I didn't even feel surprise. When you apply pressure to a lie, it either collapses or it fights back. I held the screen out to Tommy. He read it, and his jaw tightened. That could be considered a threat, he said. Could be, I agreed. Might want to save it. Al's grin faded into something more serious. You think that's him? Doesn't matter, I said. It's a message from someone who wants me scared. Tommy stared at the phone a second longer. You should document it, screenshot it, email it to yourself. If this escalates, you want a timeline. I nodded once. Tommy had always been the practical one, the guy who didn't get lost in emotion. That was why I kept him close. Emotion makes you sloppy. Timelines don't. I saved it, backed it up, and slid my phone back into my pocket. Then I finished my beer and stood. Al raised his glass in a small salute. To the Harbor Club, he said. May Blake's mask fall off in front of the people who taught him how to wear it. I didn't toast. I just nodded, because I wasn't celebrating. Not yet. Celebration comes after the dust settles, after the last paper is signed, after the threat is neutralized and the lesson is permanent. Outside, the air was cold enough to clear my head. I drove home with my hands steady on the wheel, headlights cutting through darkness like a tunnel. The city looked normal. Quiet streets, closed storefronts, the occasional late-night jogger. Like betrayal and deception were things that only happened in movies. But I knew better. As I pulled into my parking space, something felt wrong before I could explain why. My apartment windows were dark, which was normal, but the darkness looked disturbed, like a room that should be asleep but had been awake. I sat for a moment, engine idling, listening. No music, no voices, no movement. Still, the feeling didn't go away. I got out and walked up to my door, and then I saw it. Fresh scratches around the lock, small, shallow gouges, the kind you only notice when you're looking for them, the kind someone leaves when they're impatient or inexperienced, when they think they have time, but they don't. My stomach didn't drop, it didn't twist, it just went calm, because the moment you confirm a suspicion, the confusion disappears. You're no longer guessing, you're responding. I unlocked the door and stepped inside without turning on the lights. The air smelled the same, coffee from earlier, a hint of laundry detergent, but the atmosphere felt handled, like someone had been there long enough to breathe in my space. I pulled my phone out and opened the security app. 2 alerts. 2:17 p.m. and 3:45 p.m. triggered, not a malfunction, not a cat. The system didn't trigger twice in an afternoon unless someone was moving through it deliberately. I leaned against the wall, thumb scrolling, and brought up the footage. The video loaded. And there they were. Blake first, moving like he owned the place, shoulders squared, face tight with the kind of anger that comes from entitlement. Danny right behind him, eyes scanning the room with a nervousness she was trying to hide. She kept glancing toward the camera corners like she had the faint instinct that being in someone else's home like this wasn't just wrong, it was risky. Blake didn't care. They went straight to the hall closet, then to the filing drawer in my desk, then to the storage bin under the bed, like they already knew what they were looking for. They weren't searching randomly. They were hunting. I watched Danny pull out folders, flip through pages, her lips moving as if she was reading numbers she didn't understand. Blake snatched papers from her hands with an impatient jerk, scanning quickly, stacking the ones he wanted. When she hesitated, when she looked like she might question it, he leaned in and said something I couldn't hear, his mouth moving fast. And she nodded, because Danny had always been too easy to steer when a confident man told her what was true. Then Blake found it. A small box, tucked behind old invoices and warranty documents, the kind of box you forget exists until you need it. He held it up like a prize. Danny looked uncertain, but she took it anyway, cradling it to her chest like she knew it was wrong and was doing it anyway. They left quickly after that, and Blake locked the door behind them like he was doing me a favor. I stared at the screen and let it play twice more, not because I needed to see it again, but because I was memorizing every detail, what they touched, how long they stayed, which cabinets they opened, how Danny's hands trembled when she grabbed the box. My personal financial records, tax returns, bank statements, business documents, enough information to attempt a narrative, enough to cherry-pick numbers, twist context, suggest wrongdoing, manufacture proof that I was the unstable one. If Blake's financial world was collapsing, this was his attempt to build a lifeboat out of my paperwork. I turned off the video and stood in the dark, breathing slowly. A year ago, that footage would have sent me into panic. I would have called friends, driven to Danny's place, demanded explanations, shouted into the void until my throat hurt. That's what they would have expected. Emotion, chaos, a man out of control. But I wasn't out of control. I smiled, alone in the silence of my apartment, because now I had something stronger than anger. I had evidence. Blake and Danny thought they were playing chess. They thought stealing papers meant they could rewrite the board, shift the blame, put me on defense. But what they'd actually done was step onto a square that didn't exist for them anymore. Breaking in wasn't clever, it was desperation. And desperation leaves fingerprints. I pulled up the footage again and clipped it into separate files. Entry, search, removal, exit. Time-stamped, backed up, stored in 2 places. Then I opened a note and started a clean list. What was taken, what could be misused, what needed to be frozen, what needed to be reported. Not as a dramatic reaction, but as a procedure. Because this wasn't just betrayal now, it was escalation. And escalation changes the rules. I slipped my phone back into my pocket and finally turned on the lights. The apartment looked normal, clean counters, folded throw blanket, keys on the hook by the door, but now it felt like a scene that belonged to a different story. The endgame. Blake had made his move. Now it was my turn. Thursday morning brought rain and revelation. I was reviewing the security footage of Blake and Danny's break-in when Tommy called with news that changed everything. "Your boy Blake just made a very big mistake," he said without preamble. "What kind of mistake?" "The kind that involves the FBI. Remember those New York investors he's been courting? Turns out they're not just any investors. They're connected to a federal task force investigating securities fraud in the fintech sector." I sat up straighter. "Are you serious?" "Dead serious. Blake's been sending them falsified financial statements for months, trying to get them to invest in his company. What he doesn't know is that they've been building a case against him the whole time." "How do you know all this?" "Because one of the federal agents is my old partner from Boston. He called me yesterday asking if I knew anything about Blake Moreau. Apparently, your little credit report stunt triggered some red flags in their investigation." I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. "Tommy, I never intended—" "Relax. You didn't do anything wrong. Blake did this to himself when he decided to commit fraud. You just helped speed up the timeline." After Tommy hung up, I sat in my office staring at the security footage. Blake and Danny had no idea what they'd walked into. They thought they were fighting a spurned boyfriend, but they'd actually declared war on someone who'd spent 3 tours in Afghanistan learning how to outthink and outmaneuver enemies who wanted him dead. It was time to end this. I called Ava Richardson first. "I need a favor," I said when she answered. "What kind of favor?" "The kind that gets you a promotion and puts Danny exactly where she belongs." An hour later, I was sitting in the conference room at Pinnacle Marketing with Ava and her boss, Richard Sterling. Sterling was a sharp-dressed man in his 50s who'd built his company from nothing and had no patience for employee drama. "Ms. Richardson tells me you have some concerns about one of our employees," he said, settling into his chair. "I do. But first, I need to know something. Has Danny been using company resources to conduct personal business?" Sterling's expression sharpened. "What kind of personal business?" I pulled out my laptop and opened the security footage from my apartment. Yesterday afternoon, Danny used her lunch break to commit breaking and entering. She was accompanied by her fiancé, Blake Moreau, who's currently under federal investigation for securities fraud. Sterling watched the footage in silence, his face growing darker with each passing second. "This was taken at your residence?" he asked. "Yes. They entered without permission and stole personal documents. But here's the interesting part. Danny's been telling people at the office that I'm stalking her and Blake. She's been painting herself as a victim while actively committing crimes against me." Ava leaned forward. "She's also been using company time and resources to plan her wedding. Phone calls, emails, vendor meetings, all on the clock." Sterling closed my laptop and sat back. "Do you intend to press charges for the break-in?" "That depends," I said. "I'm willing to let it slide if Danny faces appropriate consequences for her actions. I'm not interested in destroying her life. I just want her to stop destroying mine." "What kind of consequences did you have in mind?" "Termination, effective immediately. And I want her to publicly retract the lies she's been spreading about me stalking her." Sterling was quiet for a long moment, then nodded. "Done. Ms. Richardson, please have security escort Ms. Reese from the building. Her employment is terminated for misuse of company resources and conduct unbecoming." As I left Pinnacle Marketing, my phone rang. Danny. "You son of a bitch," she hissed. "I just got fired because of you." "No, you got fired because of you. Breaking into my apartment probably didn't help your case." "We didn't break in. I still have a key." "Actually, you don't. I changed the lock Sunday night. What you have is a key that no longer works, which makes what you did, breaking and entering, a felony, in case you're wondering." Silence on the other end. "Here's what's going to happen, Danny. You're going to call Richard Sterling and apologize for lying about me. You're going to post a public retraction on social media admitting that you made up the stalking allegations. And you're going to return the documents you stole from my apartment. Or what? Or I press charges and let the police sort it out. Your choice." She hung up on me. 20 minutes later, she called back. "Fine, I'll do it. But this doesn't end here, Evan. Blake won't let you get away with this." "Blake has bigger problems than me right now. You might want to ask him about his meeting with the FBI." Another silence. "What FBI?" "The ones investigating him for securities fraud. Didn't he mention that?" "Funny, you'd think that's the kind of thing you'd share with your fiancé." I could almost hear the gears turning in her head. Danny was many things, but stupid wasn't one of them. She was starting to put the pieces together. "You're lying." "Am I? Why don't you ask Blake? Better yet, ask him about his credit cards, his mortgage, and that engagement ring he bought you. Ask him how he plans to pay for the wedding next month." I hung up and drove to the Harbor Club. Blake's Porsche was in the parking lot, which meant he was inside trying to smooth things over with the management about his bounced check. I found him at the bar, looking haggard and desperate. When he saw me, his face went through several emotions before settling on resignation. "Come to gloat?" he asked. "Actually, I came to offer you some advice." "I don't want your advice." "You should. Because in about an hour, federal agents are going to arrest you for securities fraud, and when that happens, Danny's going to learn exactly what kind of man she threw away her relationship for." Blake's hand shook as he lifted his drink. "You did this. You destroyed my life." "No, Blake. You destroyed your own life when you decided to commit fraud. I just helped connect the dots." "The FBI doesn't have anything on me." I pulled out my phone and showed him a photo Tommy had sent me, Blake leaving the federal building downtown, flanked by 2 agents in suits. "This was taken an hour ago. Apparently they have quite a bit on you. Financial records, emails, recorded phone calls with potential investors. Amazing what a federal investigation can turn up when they put their minds to it." Blake stared at the photo, all the color draining from his face. "Here's what I don't understand," I continued. "You had everything you needed to steal Danny from me honestly. You're successful, charming, well-connected. You could have won her over without lying about your finances or publicly humiliating me. But you got greedy. You wanted to destroy me completely, and that was your mistake. What do you want?" I want you to understand something. I didn't destroy your life out of jealousy or spite. I destroyed it because you made it personal when you decided to humiliate me in public. You turned this from a simple case of a woman choosing someone else into a war, and I don't lose wars. My phone buzzed with a text from Danny. We need to talk. Now. I showed Blake the message. Looks like your fiancé wants to have a conversation. Wonder what that's about. I left Blake at the bar and drove to the coffee shop where Danny was waiting. She looked like she'd aged 5 years in the past week. Her perfect makeup couldn't hide the stress lines around her eyes, and her usually immaculate hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail. Is it true? She asked without preamble. Is what true? About Blake, the FBI, the fraud, all of it. I sat down across from her. What do you think? I think you're a vindictive bastard who can't accept that I chose someone else. And I think you're a woman who just realized she bet on the wrong horse. Danny's composure cracked. He told me he was successful. He showed me bank statements, investment portfolios, business contracts. How was I supposed to know it was all fake? Maybe by not being so eager to believe what you wanted to hear, or maybe by not cheating on someone who actually cared about you. You don't understand. I needed more than what you could give me. I needed security, stability, a future. You had all of that with me. What you wanted was status and money, and you were willing to throw away 4 years of love to get it. Tears started rolling down her cheeks. What happens now? Now you live with the consequences of your choices. Blake's going to prison, your career is over, and everyone in town knows exactly what kind of person you really are. That's not fair. Fair? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. You cheated on me for months, lied to my face, stole from my apartment, and tried to destroy my reputation. What part of that was fair to me? Danny wiped her eyes with a napkin. I'm sorry, Evan, I really am. I never meant for things to go this far. Yes, you did. You meant every bit of it, right up until it backfired on you. I stood up and looked down at her. This woman I'd loved for 4 years, who'd thrown it all away for a man who turned out to be a fraud. Goodbye, Danny. I hope your next relationship works out better for you. As I walked toward the door, she called after me. Evan, wait, can't we try to work things out? Now that Blake's out of the picture? I turned back to look at her one last time. You made your choice, Danny. Now live with it. The next morning, I woke up to find Blake's arrest splashed across the front page of the local newspaper. The headline read, Local CEO arrested in federal fraud investigation. Below, it was a photo of Blake in handcuffs, being led away from his office building. My phone had been buzzing all morning with calls and texts from friends, neighbors, and gym members. Everyone wanted to know if I'd seen the news, if I was okay, if I needed anything. Tommy showed up at the gym around noon with coffee and donuts. So, he said, settling into his usual chair. How does it feel? How does what feel? Victory, justice, whatever you want to call it. I thought about it for a moment. Empty, mostly. Empty? I spent 4 years loving that woman, Tommy. 4 years building something I thought was real. Finding out it was all a lie. Winning doesn't change that. But Blake got what he deserved. Blake got what he earned. There's a difference. Tommy studied my face. Any regrets? Just one. What's that? I regret that it took me so long to see who Danny really was. If I'd been paying attention, I could have saved myself a lot of pain. That afternoon, Mrs. Cray knocked on my door with another casserole and an update on the neighborhood gossip. That Danny girl came by this morning, she said, settling herself at my kitchen table. Looked like she'd been crying for a week. Asked if I thought you'd ever forgive her. What did you tell her? Told her that forgiveness is earned, not given, and that she'd have to do a lot more than cry to earn yours. I smiled, despite myself. You're a wise woman, Mrs. Cray. 78 years on this earth teaches you a few things. Speaking of which, there's something else you should know. What's that? Danny's moving back in with her parents. Saw her loading boxes into their car this morning. Guess she can't afford her own place anymore. The irony wasn't lost on me. Danny had left me for a richer man and ended up poorer than when she started. That evening, I was closing up the gym when I found an envelope that had been slipped under my office door. Inside was a handwritten letter from Danny. Evan, it began. I know I have no right to ask for your forgiveness, but I need you to know how sorry I am. You were the best man I've ever known, and I threw it all away for a fantasy. Blake promised me a life I thought I wanted, but I realize now that the life I had with you was the life I needed. I know it's too late to fix what I broke, but I want you to know that losing you was the biggest mistake of my life. I hope someday you can find it in your heart to forgive me, even if you can't find it in your heart to take me back. Love always, Danny. I read the letter twice, then walked to the shredder and fed it through. Some bridges once burned can never be rebuilt. 6 months later, I was at Murphy's with Tommy, celebrating the gym's best quarter in 5 years. Business had picked up significantly after the Blake situation. Apparently, being the guy who'd taken down a federal fraud case made me something of a local hero. So, what's next? Tommy asked, raising his beer in a toast. Next? You're a free man, successful business owner, local celebrity. Time to get back out there, don't you think? I looked around the bar, my bar in my neighborhood, surrounded by my friends. People who'd known me for years, who'd stood by me when things got ugly, who'd never doubted my character or my worth. You know what, Tommy? I think I'm exactly where I need to be. As if on cue, Sarah from the hospital walked over to our table. She'd been divorced for 2 years and had been dropping hints lately that she might be interested in more than just gym membership. Mind if I join you guys? She asked, sliding into the booth next to me. Not at all, I said, and meant it. Sometimes the best revenge isn't destroying your enemies. It's building a life so good that their absence makes it better, not worse. And sometimes, just sometimes, you get to watch them destroy themselves while you sit back and enjoy the show. Blake got 15 years in federal prison for securities fraud. Danny moved to another state to start over, but according to Mrs. Cray's extensive network, she's still single and still making bad choices. As for me, I married Sarah 2 years later, expanded the gym into the space next door,